think we probably have enough of a quorum to get started anyway. Just a sound check. Everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so the first item on the agenda, hopefully we can dispense with pretty quickly, but I just wanted to make sure that if anyone was expecting to have a call the next 2 Tuesdays, or if it's okay to cancel.
It will be good to cancel from my side.
Any objections?
No.
Yeah, no objection.
Yeah, I didn't think so. So that makes the next meeting, someone help me here, January what, 6th?
I believe it's 7th.
January
7th. Thanks. All right. Excuse me. I called out rocks separately here because there's some, well, one, Gabriel had a question, but wanted to just quickly hit, I know Eric and Sean, do we have Sean on the call yet? Yep, good. Just what the status is of the GitHub Actions. I know there's been a fair amount of back and forth on that.
Yeah, I just merged a change that's been reviewed to make a little fix to the action we want to use for that. And the next step is going to be to actually go into one of the repos, which I have been suggested one that'll work well for that. But anyway, go into one of the repos and actually set it up to run that action because we're storing it centrally in the .github repo. So it'll be a simpler call to each individual repo, in each individual repo.
Right, so you've merged the changes to .github.
Yes.
Next step is to try an example repo.
Correct. To set it up to actually run that and test it out, make sure everything works correctly before we roll it out to everyone.
And that was specifically on Helm charts, I think you were looking at, Eric, was it?
Correct.
Right.
So when you say specifically Helm chart, is that all that's being published, or is that the repo you're going to try?
So right now it is an action to publish the Helm charts. So basically anything that is, or any repo that's publishing Helm charts can use that action.
Eric, if I'm not mistaken, this is just for the ONOS project organization, or are you planning to use this across all the different GitHub organizations?
So I'm focused on ONOS project repos, but I mean, with possibly some adaptation, it should be reusable in other places as well.
Okay,
Like the idea is to make it not quite as generic as possible, because really the more specific things you can hard code, the less work it is to implement it in each place. That's actually something my team, when we made our own actions, kind of ran into, was we made everything so generic that the implementation, is full of things you have to fill in. And ideally, you want to minimize that. So they are not at this point super generic, in hopes that calling them from each repo will require very little in terms of, filling in boxes and setting variables and stuff.
Did I answer your question, Gabriel?
Kind of partially. So does it mean that you're going to generate, kind of also do something similar for the OME project then, correct?
Yeah, I think that these will be portable to other organizations.
Okay. Thanks.
So
I want. Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, do you think there will be more work needed in the .github to handle publishing of images, Eric?
Yes, yeah, the Helm charts is the first thing. Having not really worked with any of these repos and these builds before, I kind of wanted to do it just one step at a time. So
Yeah, sounds good.
really the Helm charts was not any specific thing. It was like the first repo mentioned in terms of like, look at these jobs and recreate them for these other things. Happened to be Helm publishing, so I grabbed that and started with it.
Yeah,
Could have
that
just
sounds
as
good.
easily been the Docker publish, but yeah, so I'm going to test out the Helm release, make sure everything looks good, and then implement the container releases as well.
Yeah, I think as far as getting us off the existing what was it, Garrett structure, I think the Helm charts were the highest priority anyway, because they were the ones transferred over from Garrett.
Okay, excellent.
Well, then, so Sean, how had the images been published? Was that more by hand?
No, I'm pretty sure the images were published. I'm not sure if it was Jenkins or GitHub, Larry. I would really
Okay.
have to look into it.
Okay, thanks. I didn't realize that. All right, anything else for Eric on this or Sean on this particular topic?
Yeah, probably from my side. Do you have any timeline for how we can kind of complete this in the OMEC project organization?
Let's see. I have another ticket for setting
I
these
opened
up in
one.
OMEC,
I
right?
opened
Yes.
one ticket for the OMEC project. Yes.
Yeah. So that's underway as well, but I'm trying to get these the rock artifacts done first.
Okay.
So you are approaching this problem in the same way as that other ticket had asked you to approach it in the OMEC project.
Yes,
Yeah, in
that's
terms of
correct.
consolidating, reusing. Yeah, good, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Gabriel, you had a question you were asking.
About what exactly?
Why is it not possible to configure the OP or OPC?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, okay, so we are still in the rock. Perfect. I thought we were in the infrastructure side. So yeah, I wanted to get some kind of probably historical information. Yeah, I believe Ajay partially filming on some of this data, but when someone wants to use right at the moment the rock, you are able to provision users through the rock by adding, IMSI and some other parameters, but I don't see a way to add OPC or key parameters or like security parameters through the rock. And it seems to be, from my perspective, it looks like that data comes from the CMAP application, which is a little bit kind of like confusing, right? So because if you are deploying the rock, it means that the rock is taking control over the core network and the CMAP is doing nothing. But it seems like it is a mix of both. Some data coming from the CMAP and some data coming from getting updated from the rock. So that's what I wanted to get some insight on this. I don't know, maybe Sean or somebody else who have worked on this part can fill in the data and what we can do on this.
Can you remind me what OP is?
A couple of kind of security parameters from the IMSIs that are used to provision new users.
Sean,
I
if I
see.
have to give you some context, if you remember, at some point in time, GS Lab had done the subscriber proxy to configure subscribers because that provision was not there in the ROC models initially.
Oh,
So we
yes.
brought in that concept of subscriber proxy, which would create some objects in the ROC. I couldn't recollect all the details because it's probably 3 years back we had done that. Do you remember any content around it, like how subscriber proxy works?
Oh, that's a good question. I could look and see if there's any document, but I think this was Scott and the team from the third-party company.
Yeah, I
We
think
had,
Amit from GS Lab had done that.
yeah, GS Lab.
So if am I correct? I'm in the values file here, just trying to refresh my memory.
Mhm.
My understanding had always been that this piece had to be there through SD core. It was a configuration level, never touched by ROC. Now you could ask why, but I think it's only this subset that was always quote unquote configuration as opposed to runtime.
So Larry, there are 3 parts which needs to be configured in the SD core. First is the subscriber, whatever you have highlighted here.
Yeah,
Second is the device group, where we
right.
create the groups of the devices. And the third is the creating the slices,
Slices, yeah.
where we use the device group. So now creating the slices and creating the device group, this support is there in the ROC UI. That is sure, and that everybody has used it. Gabriel's question is, how do we configure this set of subscriber which you have highlighted through UI, ROC UI? And we were trying to recall like how we had done that few years back, because ROC was never meant to be scalable, which can configure hundreds of UIs from the UI, as far as I recall. Right, so that's where we are trying to find out that connecting dots. And we know that ROC had one of the model, which was called as subscriber proxy, which
That's probably what you have in line
Yes.
122, right?
Yeah, you see
121.
line number 121, 122, 123 that we have commented out. That's what exactly is like.
That might be a historical answer,
Yeah.
but I think I would just take the subscriber proxy out of the equation. I
Yes.
kind of view that as, well, calling it a hack isn't quite right, maybe, but the whole path of learning through the proxy is no longer supported and will not be. So maybe that cuts off the historical explanation. I don't know.
Mhm.
I think so the way you described it now makes complete sense. There is this one block which I've highlighted that for some reason, perhaps because the proxy was there, perhaps because of scalability issues, was never subsumed by the ROC. The other pieces were.
But I
Just
wasn't there. Sorry, Larry. Just as you go through it, it's ringing a bell for me that there was something about these. I thought that were could be gathered through or learned or something like this as devices connected or something like this. And I remember, the conversation was the subscriber proxy actually was to automate it. Wasn't so much about scalability, but the thing is, if you put these into the ROC, then you're pushing the problem right up to the front end user. Like, where's he going to get these values of OPCs and keys?
Yeah.
those are configurable parameters.
Yeah, they are, but they're, at the same time, if they're configured wrong, something will break, right? So the source of truth for them is somewhere already in the system. I mean, it might be in some application that initialize the SIMs or something like this, or the devices or something like this.
Can I take a
What
shot
is-
at it, Sean? That triggered, I think, the explanation, which is the originally remember that ROC was for the enterprise. And it was assumed that there was let me call it a root authority that had to configure, to set this up so that the enterprises could take over. That was quote unquote the Aether ops team. And this was always assumed to be I don't know what the right way to say it is, so foundational that it was not exposed.
But what is confusing to me, so through the rock, we are actually provisioning subscribers, right? So what we're doing is we are adding additional IMSIs. So basically, instead of kind of automatically deploying this line 29, line 30, let's say UE start and UE end to kind of set, deploy a given number of IMSIs or provision a given number of IMSIs through the rock, you can actually do that, right? So you can provision IMSIs and then attach that IMSI to a user, a subscriber. But what is missing there?
But what if you were to provision an IMSI that was outside of the scope? So this is sort of the root, I'm calling it like the root authority. You can't do anything in rock that falls outside of the scope established here. So that gives you some boundaries.
I don't think so.
So if you were to provision IMSI blah, blah, 7486,
Mm-hmm.
it would fail.
Yeah, because you are not able to put the OPC on the key.
That's right. So the point is there's a root, the assumption here, I'm now explaining the intuition behind why it happened, was that someone with, I'm calling it root authority, first set the bounds because they had negotiated with the FCC or whoever. And that was well outside of the scope of anything an enterprise would ever do. Set the bounds, and now I can runtime operate within those bounds.
So then what is the point of provisioning users in the rock then?
This doesn't, so you can, I mean, maybe this isn't the way it's actually implemented, but I think the thinking was that this didn't provision these. This just set the bound, this set the parameters that could be configured. And Sean, am I saying it the way that was consistent with the way you remember it?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't want to have like we didn't want to throw basically all of the complexity at the end user. And if there were, some other automated input that already had that information. I mean, maybe the reason it was the subscribers were in the rock, Gabriel, is that the idea was they were imported, but basically the reason they were there was to drive something like observability or something like this. That you had something to hang status off, and that you had something to hang, Grafana and those kind of things, and that's why they needed to be enumerated. But they were kind of. I always felt it was against the sort of the spirit of the thing to be doing every tiny bit of fine-grained detail and in the rock, because as Larry said, it was kind of an enterprise user interface.
Okay.
That it would allow you to see the subscribers and they might have been filled in an automated way.
But
Okay.
I have some concern about the security of this, because what I understand from that is that a range of subscribers will have the same OPC and key, and they should
Correct.
have separate key, right?
But you can always have the API allows you to have the separate keys for each subscriber. It's just that for its current way, like you can always have one start and end same and create it. And these are just sample APIs as such we have shown in the CMAP. If you, in case I think you have your own UI, I believe Canonical has their own UI, they can configure each UE with its separate OPC or OP and key and sequence number.
Yeah, that's what we do. And for testing,
Yeah.
we do use the same OPC and key because it's simple. But in a production, in a production environment, you wouldn't allow the end user to configure a bunch of UEs with the same key.
We don't cross-check and stop it for the if user continues to use the same key. It's really left to the user. But we give the functionality that user can choose to have the different fields for each subscriber. So more intention is that give the flexibility, but don't force them to have the separate then it becomes kind of inconvenient, because at some point in time when we were doing the scale test of like 5,000 subscriber or something, it was painful to configure separate subscriber from the testing point of view. Yeah.
So that's, I mean, this is the explanation. This does not say this was clearly the right way to, but I think, Gabriel, to your original question, whether this is managed in quite the right way, and again, maybe it doesn't scale in a production setting. There was a line being drawn between the overall operator, who had this root privilege to negotiate with, you know, whoever hands out and sets the security parameters, and the admins that were administering through the GUI or the API individual enterprises. That line is there, somewhat dotted. You could argue that on, you know, above that line where you have you were assumed to have root authority, that was probably not the best possible interface for scaling, but it was one that was workable for how Ether got deployed.
Okay. Probably one more question, Sean. Is it doable to kind of configure OPC and key through the ROC API, or it's just this is fixed towards the CMAP that has to be in the CMAP configuration itself?
No, I mean, I think it was a conscious decision to not include them in the model, but
Okay.
I think that can be changed. They could be included in the model if they're, you know, brought in at the right level of granularity and all that. I don't know what all the constraints would be on these values, but yeah, I think it is feasible to put them in the model.
But my question is more like, in the sense, is not that is not visible on the GUI itself, but in general the ROC API doesn't support it. That's more my question, correct?
Yeah, if they're not in the model, they're not in the ROC API.
Well, I don't know about the model, but I know about the GUI.
The models define the API. I mean, it's just generated, so they're equivalent.
Yeah, the GUI isn't generated. The GUI was crafted off the API. So I would have to check the model. I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I don't think they were in the model.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thanks.
All right, so my conclusion here is, to the issue of production ready, is this root mechanism sufficient / scalable? Not necessarily, or probably not, maybe is a better way of saying it. And could the ROC be extended to support changing this info? Yes, it could. All right. If you have a proposal, Gabriel, want to run it by people, I think we've sort of hashed out the rationale that was there.
Okay.
Anything else on that general topic? All right, infrastructure, and Eric, I know you started to look at Jenkins. Is there any, I know you got other things on your plate, but did you make any progress there?
No, as I respond to the ticket, what I need is access to the ether-aws-automation@opennetworking.org email list.
Right.
I have to have that to make progress.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, and we've got time in here, so maybe.
Yeah, can I get that email again? Or put it into chat?
Yeah, I can throw it in the chat.
Thanks. Okay. On-ramp. So first point is, Gabriel,
Mm-hmm.
about version control. You want to say more about that?
Yeah. So now we have more users, of course, using on-ramp, and not necessarily everybody is using basically the same commit. Somebody just can clone now, and that version is not necessarily going to be the same as the one that tomorrow or the one from yesterday. On-ramp is evolving, is improving. So I was wondering whether there is any thoughts in here to start kind of tagging releases, specific versions, such that when you, from the documentation, say, okay, clone on-ramp and start using this given version or this specific tag, right? So that is going to make things easier to provide support, especially when there are new users. So sometimes, at least personally, I have to start asking what gets deployed, when you clone, or things like that to better understand what exactly is happening on ramp. Based on that, I can start helping people. But I was wondering whether it's on having some type of release process as we have it, in the components themselves, whether that could be something that has been taught or something that could be implemented that make things easier to provide support. But that's kind of more like the question on this.
Yeah, it's a good question. It should be, I think, clearly should be done. It'll take a little while. I think the issue, let me just try to think through some of the challenges. One, so the biggest challenge in my mind is we need a well-defined release process, right? Obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And that in turn implies need, what's the right word here? Dependable testing. Just as an example, the multi-UPF of blueprints. Let me just add that. So it is still the case that, for example, the stability of the blueprints is very non-uniform across. Stability of on-ramp / Aether is dependent upon which blueprint it is. So the UPF, multi-UPF blueprint, as an example, is not very reliable bringing it up. And I can't say for sure why. But I think we would need to be much more rigorous in the testing before we declare a release. And I think that's kind of related to today releases on-ramp releases are kind of tied to SD core releases.
Yeah, but
so for instance, just to say what I mean by that, if you were to ask someone, what is the SD core Helm chart version number that you have in your on-ramp, that would be a really good indicator of what version of on-ramp they had. Does that make sense?
Partially, yes. That is assuming that the user is only kind of like interested on the core itself, right? Because you have the other modules.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. But every blueprint has the core in it. Again, it's not a perfect one-to-one, but it would be the first question to ask. Maybe it is a small suggestion to make.
Okay.
What are other people's thoughts here?
I think Gabriel has a problem when we need some solution. I think what he's saying that every time people come to him and effectively he find that people are either not using the compatible version, or maybe they are using the old on-ramp and probably new images. I believe these are the typical problems, or maybe new Helm charts. And he need to a way to somehow tell people like, oh, this is the on-ramp and it's compatible with what version, right? And I think Larry, you're saying is that when you want to, we don't have the process to release the on-ramp because we need enough testing to confirm that it really works with all the combination or with all the blueprints, right? So
So for example, that's what I'm saying. And let me slightly put a little bit more of a color on that, which is, you might be releases paced by the weakest blueprint. And so if to do an on-ramp release, suppose there's a new SD core release. That's probably our most important visible thing that happens. To ship on-ramp that includes that to declare a release of on-ramp that references the new SD core release, it seems like you would want to make sure that SD core release worked on all the blueprints. So now the pacing, you've gated the release of SD core on making sure all the blueprints work, which means, to a first approximation, all the RAN options work. That's a good thing to do, but it is going to pace the SD core. Is that okay?
Gabriel, what do you think?
No, probably, I mean, what Larry indicated, first question to ask what kind of SD core release it's using, but even though, that would be when somebody's only using the core, because there are going to be the other components. The core may stay there, but the components may kind of like have some move forward. But yeah, so okay. Yeah, we can keep talking later.
Yeah, I think this is a great topic.
Continue on this.
It needs to be done.
Yeah, we can continue later on because we already have the time, but we haven't progressed that much from the agenda perspective, and there's no meeting in the next 2 weeks. So
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. But I thank you very much for bringing this up, because we do need to get to the point that we can do this.
mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit related to the next bullet, which is, if once the subnet variables are out there, semantic versioning wise, this would be a minor release upgrade, because it is technically an API change. If you think of the API as of what variables are available to you to control a release. So I'll turn this into, I haven't turned these into PRs yet. I'll do that maybe yet today, but if you wanted to take a look, which I can just follow this link real quickly for everyone's benefit. What basically happened is we got rid of some extra iFace definitions, access and core, because those are fixed. And so those are hardwired into playbooks. And we added these two subnets and then desubnetized these two. And if there were additional UPFs, they would have their own version of these, actually this whole thing. So each UPF gets that defined. The UPF as a whole has those variables defined. I mean, that's it, kind of minimal at the top level, but that touched variables through every playbook and every template. It was kind of a tedious thing to do. But again, you can comment on these. Just wanted to make you aware that it was coming. Okay, SD-RAN Jenkins job is being debugged, but we do have the blueprint there, and it's been verified in people's labs. This looks like a discussion topic. Can we postpone it? Maybe come back if we got time at the end.
Sure.
It's a good, yeah. By the way, there are other blueprints we're waiting on. The ARA test bed's going to do some blueprints. So I think we're going to have more blueprints like this in the works. Let's move on to SD-RAN.
I think Wujon dropped and he said he's coming back.
Well, let's go to core and we'll come back to RAN then.
Yeah, so we merged a few PRs again from that were automatically open, but also the canonical team opened a couple PRs that are not targeted towards the main branch, but were targeted toward a specific release branch. And based on that, I noticed that we haven't properly handle those kind of situations in the GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions for now is handling everything nice as long as you target the main branch. So this is something that we need to properly address, because also based on this issue, Ajay also pointed out that probably we need to gonna redesign the CI/CD pipeline compared to what we did on, I think, February or March, because we were using we first increased the version release, the version in the version file, and then we release the branch based on the previous version, which is not necessary, which may be confusing when basically creating this other PR. So, but this is something that at least for now, Gulson, the person from Canonical who opened the PRs for these fixes towards the other the release branches. So I mentioned that to her, and she said that she may take a closer look into that part, how we can fix that. And that's kind of the reason why I was asking Eric if there is any timeline such that we can go directly to the the centralized GitHub Actions instead of targeting this specific branch, this specific GitHub Actions on the AMF and NRF repositories. But yeah, this is something that we're working on. Then the other part I was kind of concentrated, fully concentrated last week on continue working on the 3GPP release upgrade. So I basically have a new start, updating a few things on the OpenAPI specs from 3GPP. It seems like the OpenAPI code generator doesn't properly handle cases where there is any of combined with enums. So the output code seems really sketchy. So basically I start making a few modifications that seem like the original code, but try to avoid this using this any of keywords as part of the API when there are enums for now. So from that perspective, we say that we're going to start using, creating the OpenAPI for a specific network function. So I use the SMF as a starting point, and that one uses 6 different 3GPP specs. I created the code for those 3GPP specs, and then one of those is the NF discovery, which is also used in the NRF cache side. From that, the NRF cache submodule, which is inside the OpenAPI, it has 3 components. I fixed or updated the code. For 2 of those files, I still need to address the code for the third file, which is a match filter related stuff. And that I need to spend more time because I need to fully understand, based on this new change, what is the exact API or the correct API that needs to be used, because in the past there was used the same API that is for searching was used for matching, which I don't think is the correct one. And I believe when that was done, some extra code was manually added to properly handle that kind of situation. But the new APIs, the new 3GPP upgrade has like 6 or 7 APIs now compared to the single API that was before. So I believe one of those APIs is going to handle this situation properly, but I need to go through the code to understand which is going to be the API that needs to be used. And then on top of that, I think I saw that Ajay mentioned something about the DRSM. You want to go about that, Ajay, or would you like me to give a general explanation of the issue?
I don't know if you have time, but I added the README there in the chat, and I have raised it. I had some documentation which I just copied into the README file now, so it's better reference for most of the people. Right, so yeah, it's typically, I think there were some questions from iOS MCN guys, like what exactly this DRSM model. And it's really useful only if you are using multi instances of AMF and SMF. So DRSM is a small Go model which we use to create the unique identifiers which doesn't clash across the instances. Yeah, I mean that's a basic need. The moment we start multiple instances, we need to make sure that every instance get unique resource IDs. And this library helps us to get those unique IDs based on the, and it does keep some of the bookkeeping data into the database. So it has dependency on the MongoDB. Yeah, so I think, yeah, maybe those who are interested in understanding more can look at the pull request and probably give some comments. Yeah, I can add on if there are some more questions. And then there are some performance related issue Gabriel has raised. I will probably go over the code to initially to correct the logging level, which seems to be a lot more logs throwing up from that model, right? So I correct those logs. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. ARA?
Yeah, so on our side, basically we are still like looking at the SD core with the Ericsson. I think we are at the final stages. I mean, at a point we thought we were almost done. So what we did, I think I provided like a detailed issue on the Slack, the on-ramp Slack channel. Probably maybe I'm yet to get any feedback on that. So what we did, as I already mentioned last week, is kind of send like packets using Hyper for several hours. Kind of, we're trying to do some sort of like stress test to make sure that everything is fine. But that is where we figured out that after a few hours, the UE is released from the core network. We've collected some logs that we are currently checking, and also on the UE side, we are using some Qualcomm tools to collect the logs at the UE to better understand it. So that's where we are right now. But then if maybe folks have any thought on that, that would be also good to hear. So.
All right, thanks. I don't know, AJ or Gabriel, do you have any comment on what the issue is? Have you learned anything from this?
No, I haven't had time to look into
Okay,
that. I
thanks.
don't know,
I just-
Ajay, if you have some time.
Well-
I have been fully concentrated on 3GPP release upgrade plus other stuff that I have to do.
Is this the one which you had shared on the Slack?
Right, that's correct.
Yeah. Just give me today's time. I'll look at it today. I just got distracted with something else.
Yeah.
If you don't get any response, just remind me so that I don't forget it. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
We are also trying to figure it out. If anything, we'll also let you know.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's on the SD core. On SD-RAN, TNU is on travel, so he has no updates. Yeah. And we are also, as we discussed over the email, we are working on the blueprint. So we'll let you know when it's ready.
So,
Yeah, but sorry, Larry, so
go ahead.
yeah, typically the issue, like whatever you have said, like UE context release, typically it is seen if GNodeB doesn't see any activity for the user. So UE or mobile is not doing anything. There is no data, there is no control signaling, and that's where there is a typical timer of like configurable timer, which runs into 5 to 10 seconds, sometimes 20 seconds. And that's where you see UE context release. So I can anticipate that to debug this, we would need some debug logs on the GNodeB as well to get the reason why they're releasing the context.
Right. That was what I thought initially about the inactivity timer, but this
correct.
time there's data on the. UE is it's not idle actually, so UE is
okay.
Data. So so the issue is actually observed. If you are not sending any like data using maybe let's say Hyper, nothing happens, right? Like UE, anytime you want to connect. Well, basically what I'm trying to say is that for short periods of time, if you are sending data, this issue doesn't happen. UE is not released. It's after a very long time. So UE is not idle actually. It's always like sending those packets to the core.
Okay, sure. We'll check in. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Larry. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So, yeah, you were gonna say something about the blueprints you have in works. I'm gonna guess, is this gonna be for the Ericsson radio, or are you gonna do multiple blueprints?
Yes, so I was thinking of also adding the OEI, I mean, using like the USRPs on both ends. If that is, I mean, of any interest. Yeah,
Yeah,
especially
yeah.
running it on
But
roll
the-
with
how different is this blueprint, OAI blueprint with the radio to what Bilal did or what we already have in on RAM?
So I think what we have, what it's on the on ramp is basically the RF sim for the
No, it supports
Oh,
both.
oh,
It
we have
supports both. You can
oh.
actually select either simulation, which is RF simulated, or you can connect a USRP there. So
Right. Okay.
yeah, you have a variable there to kind of manage that part, which kind of deployment you want.
Right. Okay.
So even if, I think this is maybe a different class of blueprint, which I've been anticipating, but we don't have an example to know for sure if it makes sense. And that is, if, for example, you had a particular configuration also with a UE, it's sort of an end-to-end configuration. And maybe you do it because you have collaborators and it's just one-stop shopping. You go pick up the ARA OAI blueprint and you're ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what we do with OEI at our site here is, I mean, it's literally same as what most people do, but here we do like everything in Docker. So we have like Docker images for the OEI UE and then the OEI GLB. And then like if you want to run any experiment, either you can bring your own Docker images or pull custom like Docker images. Then we also have scripts that's especially how, like, for example, you have the B210, how you can access the B210 on the host through the Docker container, right? And then also like using the N320. So we have scripts that, for example, like we configure Mac VLANs to be able to have access to the USRP through the Docker. So those are kind of like minimal or minimalistic stuff that we kind of do just to support running in Docker containers, which are like easily reproducible, like in terms of experimenting and all that. So that is the little different touch so far as the era OEI experiment is concerned, as compared to like the bare metal like installation.
Yes. Yeah. So take a look at the OAI blueprint, because that again that runs on containers actually.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So take a look to see how different is what you need, because it is already there. So you can just reuse what is already there or improve what is already there. So instead of creating a new one. So and that's kind of related to the item that I had about adding additional blueprints on the on-ramp side, because there may be new things that we need to add, new blueprints that we need to add, but we need to kind of fully clarify what the process is to kind of create these blueprints.
Yeah. I'll look at the USRP part. I mean, when I started with the on-ramp documentation for the OEI, I tried the RFC because I realized that, I mean, I wouldn't be able to use that directly on our test bed. So I mean the USRP part, because there's a lot of, we also use like OpenStack for provisioning and all that. So it was kind of like a new or like a different environment. So I had to take the SD core and then use our own OEI deployment and then interface or connect the two. But yeah, I haven't actually looked at the
just take a look at that.
Yeah,
Again, that's gonna support both simulation and USRP and actual RF and SDR, and is deployed in container. So it's a containerized version.
Right.
So that might be useful. I mean, good enough for what you need, or a good starting point for what you need that can just be modified.
So it's possible we can modify the OAI, and Gabriel's right that reduces, keeping the number of blueprints from exploding, so to speak, has value. Absolutely. The flip side is, with respect to releases, what we could do is declare a core set of blueprints and then maybe auxiliary ones or something, so that we we don't hold every unwrap release hostage to every single blueprint that was ever defined.
Yeah, but the
So
other
I think we have an interesting question down the road here once we have a couple of examples.
Yeah, the other part to keep in mind, Larry, is it is okay to have as many blueprints as possible, but the only thing is it's gonna take maintenance time. So somebody has to keep maintaining to make sure that with the dependencies, like what happened recently with the OAI image, right? So basically, the images in the dependencies make your blueprint to break. That is nothing internally. So somebody needs to keep maintaining that part as well. So the more blueprints that you increase, the more maintenance time that may take.
Yeah, and I think, and this gets back to a decision from a long time ago, which was every blueprint quite likely includes some separate pieces that someone has to own.
Yep.
And so I think there's a space here that we're going to have to define that it is related to releases, but it's also related to getting end to end. So, yeah. Okay, good. This is going to be interesting as we go forward.
Wujun is back.
Oh, good. Wujun.
Hey, sorry.
No problem. Go back to RAN.
Yeah. Okay. So for SD-RAN, basically we found some release blockers. The first one is the SD core chart, and the other part is the 4G hardware documentation. So for SD core chart, I just realized that SD-RAN in a box have used the Aether ham chart repository to pull the SD core ham chart. And it seems like a few weeks ago that was removed. So we updated it to use SD core ham chart repository in SD core workspace. And we also updated that SD core chart. Well, basically the one that we have used is really old one, but I just bumped it up to version 1.4. And after we deploy that 1.4 version, this is for 4G network. So after we deployed 1.4, it seems like there are a couple of issues. One is UPF was facing the out of memory killed. So I checked the SD core chart, and seems like SD core chart has a kind of fixed resource memory resources there. So once I double it, it seems it was fixed. Not sure that resource definition in the SD core chart is right or not, but well, that should be fixed, I believe. By default, it's not working, at least from my machine. And second part is happening on MME and PCRF. So there are some error messages related to too many open files issue. So once I set the file system file max variable to maximum value, it's gone. So after some configuration changes, I can finally deploy the SD core chart 1.4 with SD-RAN in a box. So I merged it. And next one is the 4G hardware documentation. So engineering team actually try to follow that document, but seems like everything is out of date. So we are rewriting that documentation at this time. So it's almost done. So I will post it to SD-RAN documentation webpage. So yeah, so that's all I have. Probably those two, the first issue is completely gone. That was merged already. And second one is something I will merge it this week before the holiday break. And the final goal is to announce this release before the holiday season or end of this year.
Thanks. I see Gabriel has a couple questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why do we have to maintain or keep using SD-RAN in a box if we already have on-ramp?
Yeah, good question. So I think a long time ago I already mentioned that, but so REAP has, well, completely on-ramp could not replace REAP at this time, as of now, I mean. So because REAP has RSM use cases with OAI and FOPI-based emulator, but on-ramp doesn't support yet. That is the major reason, because well, for that, with the REAP, we can easily test the RSM feature with 4G RAN and SD core, but on-ramp doesn't support it. But that is in the next release scope. So that's, well, maybe next release or the release after next release, we will completely deprecate the SD-RAN in a box. But before that, I think Rehab should be alive.
So I didn't quite catch what it was that on-ramp didn't support, but I know it's not got full support for 4G. Is that corrects the issue?
Yes, and also, well, for the 4G test, Rehab is using 4G OAI RAN stack with our own E2 agent. And also it supports NFAP emulator, which means that OAI can be running without USRP device for the developer. And those are quite well-tuned with SD core ham chart. So that is not merged to on-ramp yet. So that is the next release scope. So once it's ready, we can delete the Rehab, but otherwise still Rehab should be there.
Okay. Now, Woojun, you said that basically by the end of this year, the next release is going to be completed, and then you're going to start working on the next in the following release, right?
Correct.
Is that based on what we have talked in the past? I understand that the next release is going to include the CCC service model and everything related to the CCC service model. But are you planning to do something regarding the dependency updates? Because
yes, that is the highest priority, to be honest. So that was in this release scope, but we gave up because for that we need to change SD-RAN, all SD-RAN services really a lot, or in the worst case, I believe some service should be rewritten. So that is really hard at this time. So we gave up for this release, but next year I will revisit there and then try to. First task was that. First task is merging the PRs from the dependable. That is the first.
Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah, because I think I saw recently that the dependable actually stopped opening new PRs because there was no action on the previous one. So and I think there are some like security issues. So that merging those PRs is going to help addressing those kind of.
Correct. So that is happening because SD-RAN is not maintained for a long time. And Golang version updated really many versions there, and a lot of dependencies are updated, but SD-RAN still has the old dependencies and still it's using old Golang version. In the worst case, we need to rewrite some services, but I will do it next year.
Just to kind of share some information, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember whether it's gRPC or protobuf.
Correct.
But one of the two only support the latest two major Go versions.
Yes, correct. ONOS API thing is the major blocker, to be honest. So the service that I was mentioning for rewriting is the mainly ONOS API at this time. So
but since you got to move to a newer Go version, just letting you know that gRPC or I believe it's gRPC. It only gRPC, works with the latest two Go major versions.
Correct. I think that's all from SD-RAN.
All right, thank you very much for getting this update. We are at the end of the hour, so I think we will call it a day. And thanks, everyone. We'll see all of you again in 3 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Happy holidays.
Bye. Happy holidays. Bye.